The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above Ambassador Helen Brooks as she stood waiting for the final decision. The walls were made of living crystal that hummed with old power, and the voices of 47 different alien species filled the air with strange sounds. Helen had been in this room many times before, but today felt different. Today felt final. Admiral Carl Johnson stood beside her, wearing his dress uniform with all the medals he had earned protecting alien worlds. Behind them, Dr. Lisa Park held her research pad close to her chest. The pad contained years of medical work that had saved millions of alien lives across the galaxy. Captain Ryan Bell of the Exploration Fleet stood at attention, wondering if his crew would even be allowed to go home safely. The Altarian leader Zektar rose from his crystal seat. His body was made of the same living crystal as the walls, and when he spoke, the whole room seemed to vibrate. He was ancient even by alien standards, and had led the Council for over 300 years. His voice carried the weight of final judgment. The human species has been found guilty of excessive aggression and unpredictable behavior, Zektar announced. The words echoed through the hall like thunder. After careful consideration, the Council has voted to remove humanity from our alliance. All human colonies, trade agreements, and technology sharing programs are now ended. Helen felt her heart sink but kept her face calm. She had expected this but hoped it would not come to pass. The charges against humanity had been building for months. Too aggressive, they said. Too willing to fight. Too quick to act without asking permission. The final incident had been when Commander Alex Stone refused to let a Catherian science ship strip mine a planet with primitive life on it. The standoff had embarrassed the Council in front of the whole galaxy. We have given more to this alliance than any species in the past 100 years, Helen said, stepping forward. Her voice was strong despite the fear in her chest. Our doctors have cured diseases that killed your people for thousands of years. Our explorers have mapped dangerous space so your ships could travel safely. Our soldiers have died protecting your worlds from pirates and worse things. The Zenthi representative, Velanara, moved her forearms in dismissal. Her large eyes looked at Helen with something like disgust. Your contributions are noted, human, but they do not excuse your inability to follow proper procedures. You refuse to ask permission before acting. You ignore the wisdom of older species. You are too dangerous to remain part of civilized society. Helen wanted to argue more, but she could see it was useless. The vote had already been taken. 46 species had voted to expel humanity. Only the peaceful Umari had chosen not to vote, and their representative looked sad about the whole thing. Even the species that humans had saved from extinction had voted against them. You have 7 days to remove all human presence from Council space, Zektar continued. Any human ship found in our territory after that time will be treated as hostile. This decision is final. Security guards moved forward to escort the human delegation from the chamber. As they walked, Helen noticed something strange. Several council members would not look at them directly. The Corvan ambassador was whispering frantically to his aides. There was fear in their movements, but Helen was too shocked to think about what it meant. The walk to their ship felt like walking to their own funeral. Captain Bell kept checking his communicator for messages from his crew. Dr. Park stared at her research pad, knowing that her life's work would now be worthless to the galaxy. Admiral Johnson walked with his head high, but Helen could see the anger burning in his eyes. Their ship lifted off from the Council station and began the long journey back to human space. Within an hour, the quantum communications network lit up with emergency messages. Every human ship in the galaxy was getting the same order. Come home now. Do not stop. Do not help anyone. Just come home. The great exodus had begun. Captain Maya Torres was commanding a research vessel near the galactic rim when the message came through. She had been studying strange energy readings that her sensors could not identify. Her crew had been excited about the discovery, but now they had to abandon everything and head for Earth. On the trade station above, Corvan Prime human merchants were packing their goods and closing their shops. They had built thriving businesses over decades, but now had hours to leave everything behind. The aliens who had bought their products and called them friends now watched them go with cold indifference. Human colonies on the edge of known space received evacuation orders. Families that had lived on frontier worlds for generations suddenly had to choose between staying and becoming outlaws or abandoning everything they had built. Most chose to leave, but some decided to stay and face whatever came next. The Council. News networks celebrated the decision. Humanity expelled for galactic safety, read the headlines. Alien commentators talked about how much more peaceful the galaxy would be without human interference. They spoke of humans like they were a disease that had finally been cured, but in the darker corners of the galactic network, other conversations were happening. Old spacers who had worked with human crews whispered about things they had seen. Military officers who had fought beside human soldiers shared worried looks. Scientists who had collaborated with human researchers wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Admiral Johnson arrived at Earth 3 days later to find chaos. Every human military base was overflowing with returning ships. Civilian transports, packed with refugees, were arriving every hour. The orbital stations were running out of room and food supplies were running low. Emergency meetings were called on Earth. Political leaders who had spent years arguing about small issues suddenly had to deal with the biggest crisis in human history. Some wanted to fight back. Others wanted to try diplomatic solutions. A few suggested that maybe the Council was right and humans needed to change, but Johnson knew something the politicians did not understand. He had access to classified military files that painted a very different picture of humanity's role in the galaxy. Files that showed where human ships really went on their exploration missions. Files that explained why human colonies were always built in such dangerous locations. Files that revealed the true cost of galactic peace. As he sat in his office looking at reports from across human space, Johnson made a decision that would change everything. He activated his personal communicator and sent a coded message to certain ship captains who would understand what needed to be done. Operation Lighthouse is now active, the message read. Maintain your positions regardless of official orders. The watch continues. Far from Earth in the dark spaces between stars, human ships that should have been heading home instead took up positions along invisible lines that only they could see. Their crews did not understand why they were disobeying direct orders, but they trusted their commanders. They had always trusted them. The Council had expelled humanity to make the galaxy safer. They had no idea that they had just made it infinitely more dangerous. The shield that had protected them for 2 centuries was cracking, and something hungry was already stirring in the void between the stars. Something that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. The countdown to disaster had begun. 6 months had passed since the Council expelled humanity, and Captain Maya Torres commanded one of the few human ships still watching the edge of what used to be their territory. The Earthship Defiant hung in space like a ghost monitoring communications from the aliens who had cast them out. Maya had volunteered for this duty even though it meant disobeying direct orders from Earth Command. The silence was the first thing she noticed. Where the quantum networks once buzzed with constant chatter, between hundreds of worlds now there were only occasional military transmissions. The great trade routes that had connected civilizations for decades lay empty. Ships that should have been carrying goods and passengers between systems were nowhere to be found. Captain, the alien channels are much quieter than usual, reported Lieutenant Nick Davis from his communications post. He had been monitoring alien broadcasts since they arrived, and the change worried him. Most of the civilian networks have gone completely dark. Maya nodded as she studied the star charts on her screen. Before the expulsion, these trade lanes would have shown dozens of ships moving between systems. Now the displays were almost empty. Something was wrong in the galaxy, but the aliens were not talking about it. Any distress signals? She asked. Nothing on the standard channels, Nick replied. But I am picking up some strange interference patterns. Almost like someone is jamming communications across multiple sectors. Dr. Sam Mitchell looked up from his science station. Captain, I have been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns from nearby systems. Several colonies that should be broadcasting their daily status reports have gone silent. Not just quiet silent, like they are not there anymore. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. During their time in the council, humans had heard whispers about things that lived in the deep void. Old spacers would tell stories about ships that disappeared without explanation and colonies that simply vanished overnight. The alien governments always denied these stories, but the fear in their eyes suggested otherwise. "Long-range sensors show anything unusual?" she asked. "Negative on standard scans," Sam replied. "But if I adjust for subspace distortions, there are some very strange readings coming from the galactic rim, energy signatures that do not match any known technology." Before Maya could respond, her communications console erupted with an emergency transmission. The signal was weak and full of static, but the terror in the alien voices came through clearly. It was a Zenthi colony ship broadcasting on an open frequency. "This is Colony Ship Harmony requesting immediate assistance," the transmission began. The Zenthi speaker's voice was high and panicked. "We are under attack by unknown vessels. They appeared from nowhere. Our weapons have no effect. They are doing something to our ships. The hull is changing. The metal is becoming something else." Maya ordered the transmission to be put on the main speakers. Her entire bridge crew listened in horrified silence as the Zenthi voices became more desperate. "The attacking ships do not respond to communication attempts. They seem to absorb our energy weapons and use them to power their own systems. Our shields are failing. The whole breach is spreading, but it is not a normal breach. The metal is alive. It is growing. It is consuming our ship from the inside." The transmission dissolved into screams and static. Then nothing. "Try to raise them again," Maya ordered, but Nick was already shaking his head. "No response, Captain. The signal is completely dead. It is like the ship just stopped existing." Maya stared at the empty space on her display where the Zenthi colony ship should have been. "Any other ships in that area?" "Checking now," Sam said as his fingers flew over his console. "There should be a Corvin patrol squadron and at least 3 civilian transports." "I am not reading anything. The entire sector appears to be empty." Over the next few hours, more distress calls came through the quantum networks. Altarian mining stations reported attacks by ships that seemed to bend space around them. Vegan colonies screamed about creatures that could walk through solid walls. Corvin military posts sent frantic messages about weapons that turned their own ships against them. Then the calls stopped coming. Maya made the decision to move closer to the affected areas. Against all regulations and direct orders from Earth, she took the Defiant into what had been Council space. What she found there would haunt her for the rest of her life. Empty systems where thriving colonies had existed just days before. Debris. Fields that contained metal she had never seen before. Ships that had been twisted into impossible shapes floating dead in space. And everywhere the same strange energy readings that made her instruments go crazy. "Captain, we are receiving a tight beam transmission from Earth," Nick reported. "Admiral Johnson wants to speak with you personally." The face that appeared on her screen looked older than she remembered. Admiral Carl Johnson had always been a strong leader, but now he looked tired and worried. Behind him, she could see other officers moving with the urgent efficiency of a crisis command center. "Maya, what is your status?" he asked without preamble. "We have confirmed attacks on 17 different alien colonies, Admiral. Whatever is hitting them is unlike anything in our databases. The energy signatures suggest technology that operates outside normal physics." Johnson nodded grimly. "We have been monitoring the situation from Earth. Dr. Park has been analyzing the data, and her conclusions are disturbing. I need you to transmit everything you have collected to our research division immediately." "Sir, what exactly are we dealing with?" Johnson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of terrible knowledge. "Something we have been keeping away from civilized space for over 200 years, Maya. Something the Council never knew existed because we made sure they never had to face it." Maya felt her blood turn cold. "Sir, are you saying I am saying that every human colony placed on the galactic rim, every exploration mission sent into dangerous space, every patrol route that the aliens called unnecessary had a purpose. We were not just exploring, Maya, we were standing guard. The transmission ended, leaving Maya and her crew in stunned silence. Slowly, the pieces began to fit together in her mind. The aggressive exploration that aliens had criticized. The military bases built in locations that seemed to serve no strategic purpose. The willingness of human commanders to sacrifice their ships in battles that other species would have avoided. Captain, incoming priority message from the research station at Vol 359, Nick announced. Dr. Lisa Park wants to brief all ship commanders? Immediately. Dr. Park's face appeared on screen, looking exhausted but determined. Behind her, Maya could see displays showing star charts covered in red warning zones. Captains, we have completed our analysis of the attack patterns and the results are conclusive. These entities emerge from the void between galaxies approximately every 70 to 80 years. They feed on organized matter and energy, converting entire civilizations into resources for their own expansion. She paused to let this sink in before continuing. Historical records show that previous incursions were stopped by what the aliens recorded as natural phenomena or lucky accidents. Space storms that drove the entities back into the void. Gravitational anomalies that disrupted their ships. Sudden appearances of hostile forces that engaged them in battles the aliens never witnessed. Maya understood immediately. It was us, every time, Captain. Human ships have been fighting these things for centuries. Every patrol that went missing in the void zones, every colony that failed mysteriously, every exploration team that never returned. They were not accidents or failures. They were casualties in a war the rest of the galaxy never knew was being fought. Dr. Park activated a new display showing the current situation. Red zones marked confirmed entity attacks, while blue dots showed the locations where human forces had been stationed before the expulsion. The entities are moving along exactly the paths we used to guard. They are attacking precisely the worlds we used to protect. Without our early warning networks, without our forward bases, without our patrol fleets, the aliens have no defense against an enemy they do not understand. Maya looked at the display and saw the terrible truth. Humanity had been expelled for being too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous. But their aggression had been directed at threats the aliens never saw. Their unpredictability had been adaptation to an enemy that followed no known rules of warfare. Their dangerous behavior had been the price of keeping the galaxy safe. What are our orders, Dr. Park? Continue monitoring and gather as much intelligence as possible. Admiral Johnson is preparing a response, but we need to understand exactly what we are facing before we can act. As the transmission ended, Maya looked out at the empty space where alien civilizations used to thrive. The Council had forced humanity to leave so they could have peace and safety. Now they were learning that sometimes peace could only be bought. With the willingness to fight wars that others would never understand, the entities were coming, and the shield that had protected the galaxy for 2 centuries was gone. The alien ship limped into the Sol system, trailing plasma and debris from its damaged hull. Ambassador Thekmor of the Corvin had crossed half the galaxy in a vessel that should have died 3 systems ago. His pride was gone, replaced by the desperate humility of someone who had seen his entire worldview collapse in a matter of weeks. Director Janet Collins received the distress call in her office on Luna Station. As Earth's new chief diplomat, she had spent months dealing with the aftermath of humanity's expulsion from the Council. Now, one of the very aliens who had voted them out was begging for help. "Patch him through," she told her aide. The hologram that appeared showed a being she barely recognized. Thekmor had always been arrogant and dismissive of humans, calling them useful barbarians when he thought they could not hear. Now his forearms shook with fear, and his skin had shifted to the deep purple that meant extreme distress among his people. "Director Collins," he began, and his voice cracked with desperation. "I come before you not as an ambassador, but as a survivor. My people are dying. Our worlds are being consumed by something we cannot fight or understand." Janet kept her expression neutral despite the satisfaction she felt at seeing him humbled. "That is unfortunate, Ambassador, but I seem to recall your people voting to expel U.S. from Galactic Affairs." Surely you can handle your own problems. Please, you must listen, Vecmore pleaded. The Devourer ships have taken 12 of our core worlds. They do not conquer or occupy. They consume everything. The planets themselves are gone, leaving only empty space, where thriving civilizations used to exist. And you think humans can help with this? Why exactly? Vecmore's skin shifted to an even darker purple. Because we have been analyzing the attack patterns. The entities are moving along specific routes, avoiding certain areas, attacking in a sequence that makes no sense unless— he paused as if afraid to speak the words. Unless someone was deliberately guiding them away from populated space for the past 2 centuries. Before Janet could respond, Admiral Johnson entered the room flanked by Dr. Park and Captain Bell. The Admiral looked at the alien ambassador with cold eyes that held no sympathy. Continue, Ambassador, Johnson said. Tell Director Collins what you have discovered about our supposedly random and reckless exploration patterns. Vecmore seemed to shrink under the Admiral's gaze. Your patrol routes, your colony placements, your exploration missions that we criticized as wasteful and dangerous. They were all strategic, were they not? You were not exploring for resources or knowledge, you were hunting. Dr. Park stepped forward and activated a holographic display that filled the room. It showed the galaxy with red zones marking current entity attacks and blue lines showing historical human activities. The pattern was undeniable. For 200 years, humans have been making contact with what you call the Devourers, she explained. Not by accident, but by design? Every time we established what you called an unnecessary colony, every time we sent reckless exploration missions into dangerous space, we were actually maintaining a defensive network around the entire galactic civilization. Captain Bell added his own display showing ship deployment patterns. Our so-called aggressive behavior was actually a carefully planned strategy to intercept these entities before they reached inhabited worlds. Human ships are uniquely equipped to survive first contact with Devourer technology because we have been fighting them for generations. Vecmore stared at the displays in horror. You mean every time you acted without council permission, every time you ignored our warnings about dangerous space, you were actually protecting you, Johnson finished. Our quantum defensive systems, our adaptive warfare protocols, our willingness to sacrifice individual ships for strategic advantage. All of it was developed through centuries of combat against an enemy you never knew existed. The room fell silent as the full implications sank in. Janet watched the alien ambassador struggle to process the truth. His people had not just expelled their protectors. They had crippled the very system that kept them safe. How many, Vecmore whispered. How many of your people died protecting? U.S. Enough, Johnson replied simply. Dar Park brought up another display showing casualty reports. The official records list them as exploration accidents, equipment failures, and navigational errors. The families of the dead were told their loved ones died advancing human knowledge and expanding our presence in the galaxy. They never knew their sons and daughters were actually dying to keep alien worlds safe. Vecmore's legs gave out and he collapsed into a chair. We called you barbarians. We said you were too aggressive, too dangerous. But you were fighting our battles while we lived in peace? Not just fighting them, Captain Bell corrected. Winning. The entities you call Devourers are not unstoppable. They can be defeated. But it requires tactics and technology that your civilized military forces cannot employ. It requires the willingness to do terrible things to protect innocent people. Janet leaned forward. What exactly do you want from us, Ambassador? Help, he said simply. We know we have no right to ask. We know we treated you badly. But billions of innocent people are dying. Not just Corvin, but every species in the Council. The attacks are spreading faster than we can evacuate. Johnson exchanged glances with his staff. Show him the current situation, Dr. Park. A new holographic display appeared showing real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. Red zones marked entity attacks while scattered blue dots showed the positions of human ships still operating in deep space. Captain Susan Wright is currently engaged with 17 Devourer vessels at coordinates that would put them at the Altarian home system in 6 days, Dr. Park explained. Her battle group consists of 4 ships against an enemy fleet that destroyed 3 Corvin task forces without taking damage. How is that possible? Thickmore asked. Because human ships are not fighting to win territory or capture resources. Johnson replied, we are fighting to buy time. Every Devourer ship that stops to engage us is a ship that is not consuming civilian populations. Every hour we can delay them is another hour for evacuation fleets to save lives. Captain Bell activated his communicator. Patch me through to Captain Wright. The transmission was filled with static and the sound of weapons fire. When Wright's voice came through, she sounded calm despite the chaos visible in the background. This is Captain Wright of Deep Space Command. We are currently engaged with hostile forces at grid reference 77 Alpha. Enemy fleet strength is holding steady, but our ammunition is running low. Estimate survival time at 47 hours without reinforcement. Captain, this is Admiral Johnson. You are to maintain your position and continue engagement. Reinforcements are en route. Understood, Admiral. Right out. The transmission ended, leaving the room in tense silence. Thickmore looked at the humans with something approaching awe. She is going to die, he said quietly. Probably, Johnson agreed. But her sacrifice will save millions of lives on Altaria Prime. That is what humans do, Ambassador. We die so that others might live? Janet stood up and walked to the window overlooking Earth. The question now is whether you truly understand what you did when you expelled us. Whether you are prepared to change not just your policies, but your entire way of thinking about galactic security. What do you mean? She turned back to face him. You called us too aggressive because we acted without asking permission. But when the Devourers attack, there is no time for committee meetings. You called us unpredictable because we did not follow established procedures. But the entities adapt faster than any bureaucracy can respond. You called us dangerous because we were willing to use extreme measures. But sometimes extreme measures are the only things that work. Dr. Park brought up one final display showing projected casualty figures. Without human intervention, the Devourer fleet will consume 43 inhabited systems over the next 2 months. Conservative estimates suggest a death toll in the hundreds. Thickmore looked at the numbers and then at the humans who had spent centuries dying quietly to prevent exactly this scenario. What would you need from us? Everything, Johnson replied. Full access to council space for our ships. Complete cooperation from your military forces. And the authority to take whatever actions we deem necessary, regardless of how they appear, to your civilized sensibilities. Their council will never agree to that, Janet smiled coldly. Then the council will watch their civilizations burn while trying to maintain proper diplomatic procedures. Your choice, Ambassador. Thickmore stood slowly. His decision made, I will convince them. I will make them understand what we have lost and what we need to do to survive. As he prepared to leave, Johnson called out to him, Ambassador, there is something else you need to understand. When this is over, when the immediate threat is dealt with, things cannot go back to the way they were. The galaxy has learned that it needs protectors. The question is whether it will accept protectors who do not ask permission before acting. Thickmore nodded, understanding the implications. The age of bureaucratic control over galactic security was ending. The age of human guardianship was about to begin, whether the Council liked it or not. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in their history. Representatives who had spent centuries in dignified debate now sat in stunned silence as reports flooded in from across their territories. 63 worlds had gone dark in 3 weeks. The great civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were being consumed by an enemy they could not understand or fight. Zektar stood at the center of the crystal chamber, his ancient form showing cracks that had not been there before the crisis began. The Altarian leader who had delivered humanity's expulsion order now faced the collapse of everything he had built. The Council recognizes Ambassador Thickmore of the Corvin Republic. He announced, his voice lacking its usual authority. Thickmore, rose from his seat carrying data tablets filled with intelligence that his people had paid for with blood. Honorable Council members, I have returned from the Sol system with information that will change how we understand our place in the galaxy. He activated the holographic display system, and the chamber filled with images that made several representatives gasp in horror. Twisted ship hulls that had been converted into something alive. Planets stripped down to their core, leaving only empty space. Energy signatures that violated every known law of physics. The entities attacking our worlds are not new, Vecmar continued. They have been emerging from the void between galaxies for over 2,000 years. Historical records show similar attacks occurring roughly every 70 to 80 years throughout our documented history. Velinara of the Zenthi moved her forearms in agitation. Then why have we not prepared defenses against them? Because we never faced them directly, Vecmar replied. His words fell like hammer blows in the silent chamber. For the past 2 centuries they have been intercepted and destroyed before. Reaching our space by forces we dismissed as reckless and unnecessary. The display changed to show star charts marked with human patrol routes and colony positions. The pattern was clear to anyone who understood military strategy. Every human exploration mission we criticized as wasteful, every colony we called strategically pointless. Every patrol route we said served no purpose was actually part of a defensive network, designed to protect our civilizations from an enemy we never knew existed. Zektar's crystal form darkened with disbelief. You are suggesting that humanity deliberately concealed the existence of these entities from the Council? No, Vecmar said firmly. I am saying they fought and died to protect us while we lived in ignorance of the danger. Every human ship that disappeared on the galactic rim, every explorer who never returned, every colony that failed mysteriously, was actually a casualty in a war we never knew was being fought. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives struggled to process this information. The species that had voted to expel humanity for being too dangerous were learning that the danger had been directed at threats they had never seen. Impossible, declared the vegan representative. Our intelligence networks would have detected such activities. Vecmar activated another display showing communication intercepts and military reports. They would have if the humans had not been deliberately preventing contact between the entities and civilized space. Every aggressive action we condemned, every unpredictable decision we criticized was actually tactical adaptation to an enemy that follows no known rules of warfare. Before anyone could respond, a new transmission began broadcasting on all Council channels. The signal originated from deep space where Captain Susan Wright's battle group was engaged with the largest devourer fleet in recorded history. Wright's face appeared on the display looking calm despite the explosions visible behind her. This is Captain Wright of the Human Deep Space Command. We are currently engaged with 17 hostile vessels at coordinates that would put them at Altaria Prime in approximately 6 days. Our ammunition reserves are critical, and we estimate survival time at 47 hours without reinforcement. The transmission included tactical data that made every Council military analyst pale with fear. The human ships were fighting entities that could bend space around themselves using weapons that consumed matter and converted into energy. And they were holding their own against impossible odds. Human command has decided to honor our historical obligations to galactic peace. Wright continued, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. However, our operations are now severely limited by our current exile status. We cannot establish forward bases in Council space, cannot access quantum communication networks for coordination, and cannot count on allied support or resource sharing. The message was brutally clear. Humanity was still protecting the galaxy, but the Council's own actions had made that protection far less effective. Zektar looked around the chamber at the faces of representatives who were finally understanding the magnitude of their mistake. What response does the Council wish to make to this situation? Velinara was the first to speak. We must provide immediate assistance to the human forces, whatever resources they require. On what authority? Demanded the Corvin military advisor. These humans are no longer members of our alliance. We have no legal framework for cooperation. Then we create one, Vecmer snapped. Or we watch our civilizations burn while we debate. Proper procedures. Admiral Gonson's voice cut through the argument as he joined the transmission from Earth. Council members, you have approximately 18 hours to make a decision. After that, the Devourer fleet currently engaging Captain Wright will break through to your core systems. What do you need from us? Zektar asked. Full authority to conduct military operations in Council space without interference. Complete access to your logistical networks, and the understanding that we will take whatever actions are necessary to stop these entities regardless of how those actions appear to your civilized sensibilities. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were being asked to hand over control of galactic security to the species they had expelled for being too dangerous. The Council requires time to deliberate, Zektar began, but Johnson cut him off. You do not have time. Every minute you spend in debate is another minute those entities use to consume innocent people. Captain Wright is dying to buy you the luxury of this conversation. A new alarm began sounding as more reports came in. 3 more systems had gone silent while they talked. The Devourer advance was accelerating. I call for an immediate vote. Vecmer declared. All in favor of granting full operational authority to human forces. The vote was swift and decisive. 46 species voted to grant humans complete authority over galactic defense. Only the Kitherian representative abstained, still clinging to procedure, even as his own worlds faced annihilation. Transmission incoming from the human battle fleet, announced the communications officer. Admiral Johnson appeared on screen surrounded by officers preparing for immediate deployment. Council authorization confirmed. All available human ships are moving to intercept positions. Operation Redemption is now active. Admiral, Zektar said formally, the Council apologizes for our previous actions and recognizes the sacrifice your people have made protecting our worlds. Johnson's expression remained cold. Save your apologies for the families of the crews who died fighting your battles while you called them barbarians. Right now we have a war to win. The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in contemplative silence. They had voted to restore humanity's authority over galactic defense, but they all understood that things would never be the same. The species they had expelled for being too dangerous was now their only hope for survival. Captain Wright's final transmission came through 6 hours later. Her ship was dying around her, but her voice remained steady. This is Wright to all human vessels. Enemy fleet strength is breaking. Repeat, enemy advance has been stopped. The path to Alteria Prime is secure. The transmission dissolved into static as her ship's reactor overloaded, taking 17 Devourer vessels with it in a blast that could be seen from 3 systems away. The Council members sat in their crystal chamber and finally understood what humanity had been doing for them all along. Not exploring or conquering or expanding for the sake of growth. Fighting and dying in the dark spaces between stars so that civilized people could sleep peacefully in their beds. The age of human guardianship had officially begun. Whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. The Battle of the Void Nexus lasted 3 days and became the stuff of legend among both human and alien historians. Captain Wright's sacrifice had stopped the main Devourer advance, but 17 more fleets were moving through the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. This time, however, they would not face defenseless civilians. Admiral Johnson commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled from the bridge of the carrier Washington. Ships that had been scattered across human space. After the expulsion, now formed battle groups with crews who understood exactly what they were fighting for. These were not explorers or merchants pressed into service. These were warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The alien fleets that arrived to assist were a different story entirely. Council ships designed for patrol duties and ceremonial functions found themselves facing an enemy that could bend the laws of physics. Their energy weapons were been redirected back at them. Their shields collapsed under attacks that seemed to come from inside their own hulls. Human vessels, this is Admiral Valkara of the Combined Council Fleet, came the transmission. From the Zenthi commander. Our weapons appear to be ineffective against these entities. Request tactical guidance. Captain Bell responded from his position aboard the Washington. Admiral, your ships are not equipped for this type of warfare. We recommend you withdraw to a safe distance and observe. This is what humans were designed to handle. Designed, Valkara asked. 200 years of fighting these things has taught us how to adapt, Bell replied. Our ships phase shift through their energy beams. Our quantum torpedoes destabilize their matter conversion fields. Most importantly, our crews know how to think like they do. The alien observers watched in amazement as human ships deployed tactics that seemed impossible. Vessels that could become intangible to avoid attacks, then solidify just long enough to fire devastating salvos. Fighters that moved in patterns that anticipated the Devourer ship's impossible maneuvers. Commanders who seemed to know what the entities would do before they did it. They are not just fighting them, whispered Tethelin, the Umari observer, whose species had refused to vote for human expulsion. They understand them. How is that possible after only 2 centuries of contact? The answer came from Dr. Park, who was monitoring the battle from Earth. Because we have been studying them for much longer than that. Every derelict ship our explorers found, every strange energy signature our scientists detected, every unexplained phenomenon our colonies reported. We cataloged it all and learned from it. She activated displays showing centuries of accumulated data. The entities are not random destroyers, they follow patterns. They have weaknesses. They can be predicted and countered if you understand how they think. The problem is that understanding requires a mindset that most civilized species find disturbing. What kind of mindset? Asked Zektar, who was observing the battle from the council chambers. The willingness to think like a predator, Captain Wright's replacement, Commander Lisa Kane, replied from her ship. To anticipate violence before it happens. To strike first and ask questions later. To sacrifice individual units for strategic advantage. Everything your civilizations called barbaric about humanity. As if to prove her point, Kane's squadron executed a maneuver that made the alien observers gasp. 3 human ships deliberately allowed themselves to be surrounded by Devourer vessels, then activated experimental weapons that consumed both fleets in a cascade of quantum fire. The human crews died instantly but took 12 enemy ships with them. Barbaric, Valkara whispered. Effective, Kane corrected coldly. Those 12 ships would have consumed the Altarian colony at Beta Centauri. 300 human lives for 50 million alien civilians. We call that acceptable losses. The battle raged across 17 different systems with human forces engaging Devourer fleets wherever they appeared. Unlike the aliens who fought to preserve their ships and minimize casualties, the humans fought with a calculated brutality that achieved maximum damage regardless of cost. Captain Maya Torres led a suicide run against a Devourer command vessel that was coordinating attacks across 3 sectors. Her ship, the Defiant, charged directly into the entity's matter conversion beam while her crew chanted ancient war songs. The explosion when her reactor overloaded destroyed not only the command ship but disrupted the quantum field that allowed the entire enemy fleet to function. Human tactics appear to rely heavily on self-sacrifice, observed the Corvin military analyst Thekmore essayed. Not self-sacrifice, corrected Admiral Johnson. Calculated tactical expenditure. Every human crew that dies takes out multiple enemy vessels and saves countless alien lives. We have been making these calculations for 2 centuries while you lived in peace. The tide of battle began to turn as human reinforcements arrived from deep space. Ships that had been maintaining their lonely vigil in the void zones, despite official orders to return home. Crews who had disobeyed direct commands because they understood what would happen if they abandoned their posts. This is Captain Roberts of Deep Space Station Alpha, came a transmission from the Galactic Rim. We have been tracking 17 more Devourer fleets moving toward Council space. Estimated arrival time is 6 hours. How many ships do you have? Johnson asked. 43 combat vessels, Admiral, all volunteers. Johnson did the math quickly. 43 ships against 17. Fleets was hopeless odds by any conventional measure. But human tactics were not conventional. Proceed with interception, Captain. Buy us as much time as you can. Yes, sir. Robert's out. The alien observers watched the display showing Robert's small fleet moving to engage impossible odds. None of them expected to see those ships again. They were wrong. 8 hours later, Roberts transmitted again. This is Captain Roberts reporting mission accomplished. All enemy fleets have been neutralized. We have 17 ships remaining and are proceeding to the next intercept point. How's that possible? Velkara demanded. Roberts' tired voice carried a hint of satisfaction. We used their own tactics against them, Admiral. The Devourers convert matter into energy for their ships. So we gave them ships full of unstable quantum reactors disguised as cargo vessels. They consumed our bait and poisoned themselves from the inside. Dr. Park smiled as she monitored the reports coming in from across the galaxy. The entities are retreating to the void zones. Human forces are pursuing to ensure they do not regroup. Victory is confirmed. In the aftermath, as human medical ships tended to wounded alien vessels and human engineers helped repair damaged stations, the political landscape of the galaxy shifted forever. The species that had expelled humanity for being too dangerous now understood that the danger had been the only thing keeping them safe. Zektar personally traveled to Earth to deliver the Council's formal apology. The ancient being who had once dismissed humans as barbarians now stood humbly before the species that had saved his civilization. We have spent months analyzing our historical records, he said to the assembled human leadership. Every human action we interpreted as reckless aggression was actually strategic planning. Every protocol violation we condemned was tactical flexibility. Every instance of unpredictable behavior was adaptation to threats we were too civilized to comprehend. Director Collins accepted the apology with dignity, but her words carried weight. Understanding the past is important, Zektar, but wisdom requires planning for the future. These entities will return eventually, and when they do, the galaxy must be ready. The new Galactic Defense Accords were signed 6 months later with humanity. Not just reinstated, but recognized as the primary guardians of galactic civilization. Human colonies were re-established along the void zones with full council support. Human patrol fleets resumed their eternal watch with alien crews learning alongside them. Human tactical doctrine became required study for all military academies. But the most important change was cultural. The council species finally learned to value what they had always seen as human flaws. The aggressive curiosity that drove humans to explore dangerous space became the foundation of new early warning systems. The unpredictable creativity that let them adapt to impossible threats became the basis for revolutionary military technologies. The stubborn refusal to accept established limitations became the philosophy that guided galactic defense. Captain Susan Wright was posthumously awarded the highest honors of every council species. Her sacrifice had saved not just Altaria Prime, but the entire galactic civilization. At the memorial service, attended by representatives from 47 worlds, Admiral Johnson spoke words that would be remembered for generations. Susan never wanted to be a hero, none of us did. We just wanted to make sure that when alien children looked up at the stars, they saw wonder instead of horror. That dream was worth any sacrifice, worth any misunderstanding, worth any amount of hatred from the people we protected. Vekmur stepped forward to speak for the council. We called you barbarians because we did not understand that sometimes civilization requires barbarians to defend it. We called you dangerous because we did not realize that you were only dangerous to those who threatened the innocent. We expelled you because we feared your strength, not knowing that your strength was the only thing standing between us and annihilation.